Hello there. Welcome to the second episode of CUZZO-OP. Two cousins, one podcast, endless entertainment.
Hey, before we jump on in, listen, you might have noticed this episode is an hour and 30 minutes long. It's hard to talk about 30 plus pieces of Marvel content in a short amount of time. We did our best. We hope that you enjoy it. Episodes won't normally be this long, rest assured. But for the time being, buckle up, maybe listen in pieces. But we hope you enjoy the episode.
I'm one of your hosts, Willie, also known as Arrow. And as always, we have
Isaiah, aka IV. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be talking about this particular episode, Marvel. Honestly, bro, I can't believe Ant-Man is kicking off phase 5. That's crazy. Anyways, go ahead. Ask your questions, bro. Ask your questions.
Yeah. So Ant-Man drops tomorrow. And these are just some questions that I really wanted to get out there so that people listening understand where we're both coming from as fans of this franchise.
Absolutely.
So at first, I really just want to know what your start to the MCU was. The MCU, of course, being Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, no, I think definitely first memory that comes to mind is Iron Man 1. First line that comes to mind is that Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps. Like, come on, bro. When my man, Jeff Bridges was slept on in that film, man. He did his thing in that movie. And that kicked it off for me back in high school. We just all were going to the theater to watch movies. Anything that came out Marvel, I was there to watch. I'm not one of those guys that likes waiting for the movie to come out and I can watch it at home. I was always big on, I want to see it in the theater. I want to experience it to the fullest. So that was definitely my beginning. And from there, it was like an addiction. I watched every single film and put everybody I possibly could on. If you're my friend, you know I love Marvel. My family, you already know I had you sit down and watch it in order. So speaking of tradition, that's my thing. I like watching everything. And I went back and watched it all in chronological order too. So I love Marvel. What about you?
Yeah. I remember seeing Iron Man in theater also. I've seen most of the films in theaters. I can think of maybe like 5 or 6 that I haven't been able to go out and watch.
Right.
Yeah, a journey it is. I also try and put people on. I've put people on. I have people that, hey, you should watch this. They're like, I will one day. Like 2 years later, come back to me like, yo, I finally did it. You was right.
They were sleeping.
I'm like, what can I say? You know, I'm glad to have been there from the beginning. I'm glad that I have some of the greatest movie theater experiences from this franchise. I go, me and my 2 friends, to almost every one. We go day one, sit down right in the movie theater because we buy our tickets the moment they're ready to go. We sit there, we watch, we go home, and we just hop online and we're like, yo, what was that?
Big facts. I mean, back in college, I had a job at an AMC theaters, and one of the perks of the job was they let you watch a movie coming out that weekend on like a Tuesday and get like a special screening in. So I remember seeing Age of Ultron in the IMAX theater before everyone else did. Watching that movie like 5 times over because I was at the theater. Winter Soldier, Winter Soldier, what?
Yeah, and you know, like I said, I remember going and watching all these movies with my friends, but you and I have seen 2 MCU movies together in theaters, if I'm not mistaken. We saw Guardians of the Galaxy on opening day, I believe.
Yeah, I remember that.
You, me, and your sister, we went and watched it, and then we came home that night, and you was like, yo, you haven't seen Winter Soldier, and you pulled it up on a ghetto website right on your small TV, and we just sat there and watched, and I was like, damn. That was great. And then the day before Ant-Man released, you and I went into the city.
Yes,
we watched Ant-Man there. That was a great time. So it's kind of awesome that we get to sit here now, 8 years after Ant-Man's original release, and discuss it's the end of the trilogy. You know?
Man, I love that. I mean, I think it's crazy that Ant-Man is kicking off phase 5. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Winter Soldier, as a movie, I remember I wish that you had seen it in theaters, even though we pulled it up on a bootleg site and we watched it. it was just so good that I remember us sitting in the room and you just being like, yo, this is so good. But Captain America is my favorite hero in that whole bunch. So I'm definitely biased, but his trilogy is so good.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let that take us into the next segment because we've kind of been over where we started and what our MCU tradition is. We'll go with favorite Marvel movie, the favorite MCU film out of the 30 that they've released so far.
So I got this list in front of me, right? And I mean, for the longest time, man, Winter Soldier has always been my favorite movie. I just think the Russo brothers, that was when their genius was on display to the fullest. And I think it is what hooked them into being able to be such important contributors to everything when it came to Infinity War and Endgame. And I don't know. I just think my experience for Winter Soldier, we went with a bunch of friends from college. And I remember sitting in the theater and it was a jam-packed theater. I'm talking about not a single seat opening weekend. Remember, I got the tickets because I was working at the movie theater. We're sitting in the theater watching this thing, man. And we all left. And there's that point in the movie. This is a spoiler, but at this point, if you haven't seen it, what are you even doing with your life? Where what the hell, Hydra? The hell? Yo, bro. I remember being creeped out at the twist of the movie and us walking out of the theater. I'll never forget. Winter Soldier really did a lot. I think that movie is my favorite. One, because of how it hit and the time it hit. But I mean, the action sequences were insane. The way that they showed Captain America, the human side of him, and the fact that like he was a fish out of water, and I love how they did that. And then they took Bucky and they pulled this heart out of him from the first film. That we knew that he had love for Bucky, but I just love the tension that it created. And they continue to build on this idea of what's right and what's wrong for Captain America, which ultimately becomes the hill he dies on. Not dies, but you know what I mean. And I think that's why I love that movie so much. I just felt like it was a spy film, wonderfully paced. Action scenes were incredible. Everyone remembers the fight scene with Bucky with the knife flipping in the air. It's just like, I see clips of it on YouTube like all the time, still to this day. So I'd say Winter Soldier was definitely my favorite. What about you?
Yeah, I've rewatched the MCU tons of times. And so I've written it down, I've written numbers, I've written reviews.
See, Willie's about this life, yeah.
Winter Soldier is marked down as my second favorite MCU film.
And he watched it on a bootleg site, folks. Come on.
But is only one of two MCU movies that I gave a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
My number one favorite MCU movie doesn't even have a 10 out of 10. It has a 9 out of 10. And that's Captain America Civil War.
Oh, Civil War, so good.
Now, my reason behind this is because it feels like the middle point, the climax of the MCU, as much as Infinity War and Endgame are. Civil War honored everything before it, honored the characters that were in the movie, introduced new characters in spectacular ways, and then said, now everything in the MCU moving forward from this point is impacted because of this.
Yeah.
And to this day, yes, Winter Soldier is seen as, yeah, that's Winter Soldier, word. But every few months, what movie are people arguing about on Twitter? Captain America Civil War.
It's true.
Every few weeks, I go on and it's like, don't forget. I remember which one of you guys were Team Cap, Team Iron Man, this and that. And the great thing about that film is I don't think they made either side incredibly right, even though I feel like one side is stronger. And I think we're going to do a podcast on that also, just because of how many layers.
No, I want to hear that. I want to hear that off the top of your head. But what team were you? Were you Team Iron Man?
I was Team Captain America.
Right.
And I've had many discussions with people about why I am on that side and still am to this day. And I think even the MCU has answered which side was correct. Especially if you've watched She-Hulk, they give you the answer to whose team was right, but whatever. Civil War is just like the action from Winter Soldier and in the heart of characters like Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, and it's just like it's perfect, even though it's not. You know, there's still flaws with the movie. When I want an MCU movie to just get everything in me going, that's the movie I put on. When I want fun, but I want emotion, that's the one.
I mean, Spidey dropping in on the ruse, like that was just iconic.
Black Panther, in my opinion, in his best MCU appearance.
Yeah, I don't understand why they did him so slime in the actual movie and like made him a little weaker than he was in Civil War. I still to this day don't get that, but I loved his appearance in that one too. Still playing on that emotional connection, of course, right? When it comes to Bucky and again, like everyone gets caught up with how many heroes were in Civil War, but it was a Captain America movie. He was at the core of the tension, you know, and I think that's so cool how they were able to have so many big, powerful characters be a part of the movie, but Captain America was still at the forefront.
Yeah, I believe that he is both of our favorite characters in the MCU. And I think, I don't know why you feel that way, but just to share, just for those who may not be as interested in the MCU, Captain America is the definition of like what humanity probably should be. He is someone who never gives up because he believes in the good. You know, and it's just like, I don't know, something about him is just like, wow, like that man is what I want to be in some ways. I want to, the personality that he brings to the table. It's like, there's a reason why every single Avenger worked well with Captain America. Every single Avenger could sit down and have a conversation with that man when half of them hated each other.
That's very true.
He was the heart of that team in the sense of you could find him anywhere and he's that guy. So, you know,
for a fight without knowing what he was fighting for. And that's major. That's major. But I also will push back on you because in that movie, the Civil War, the war existed inside of him as well, like we said, right? And I think him hiding that piece of information from Tony Stark that he knew Bucky killed his parents, that point also makes him more human because he's flawed, you know, and that's where the writing of these movies starts to take a deeper. I understand when major directors say that the MCU is diluting movies and is making it so that there's just trash on the screen. Like I can hear what you're saying, right? But at the end of the day, this movie is a perfect example of Civil War. Honestly, the entire Captain America trilogy. It just shows that writing in these movies, it's not lazy. I don't think it's lazy. There was a time where I felt like it was innovative, actually, especially when these movies were coming out. I'd actually push back on you on the Civil War thing because I think Winter Soldier was really where things started crumbling. I feel like we saw a buildup, right? You got Captain America, like chronologically, Captain America, Captain Marvel, Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, Thor, Avengers, Dark World, Iron Man 3. All of these are building up. We know who the good guys are and we know who the bad guys are. And then Winter Soldier hits and S.H.I.E.L.D. is no longer strictly the good guys. And now I'm like, who do I trust? Who do I rock with? Who do I like? Y'all remember that scene when Nick Fury gets shot up in his car in Winter Soldier? That scene is crazy. I just felt like it was cool. I like one thing I like about the Marvel is they're not afraid to poke holes in themselves and to kind of put everything we trust in these heroes, risk that trust. I think that makes it a lot more, we're on the edge of our seats as we're watching. And so the Captain America movies definitely have done that every single time.
Yeah. Just one last thought on this before we move into my next my next point. Yes, the way they turned everything we thought we knew on its head in Winter Soldier was great.
Right.
But Civil War, it was like to watch both sides, characters that we don't want to see fight, you know, because it's easy to see Captain America go smash some dudes into walls and stuff. But
absolutely,
we don't want to see these characters throwing hands over something that's what, like, they should be working together on this, and it just, so watching these two sides, these two factions go back and forth, each of them with their right arguments and their flaws, were great. And Captain America's flaw in the movie made me love him even more, because it's like he wants to be that perfect person, but he's letting that relax for a little. He's letting that drop.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to ask you this, because your point, sorry to cut you off, your point, it makes me think, okay, so then what are the weaker parts of MCU up until this point? Like, what are some movies that you feel like we could do without, in light of the fact that these greater movies ask us these big questions that become pillars for why we think the MCU is so special? What are some movies that you're like, I could have done without this one, to be honest with you? Or this was a little weak. I feel like it didn't add to the big picture.
So one thing I want to say is that this leads into the next point very well. The state of Marvel and leading up to Phase 5. There are movies that should have been made during certain periods of the MCU that weren't, and they were made later. And I think it harmed those movie-going experiences. Captain Marvel was hurt because it was made at the wrong time. They introduced us to a new character in the middle of the two biggest movies in the MCU. And so you're sitting down and you're watching that movie, and what are you thinking in your mind? There's a reason why this movie's coming out now. Why do I need to know this person? And that's it.
And that dropped, just for the people who aren't familiar with Marvel, that dropped in between Infinity War and Endgame, right?
Yes, the two biggest Avenger movies. It dropped 2 months before, not even a month and a half before Avengers Endgame. We had never seen her before the finale of what the MCU was building towards. And they're trying to throw her in at the last second. So we're sitting there, we're not watching that movie thinking, let's fall in love with her. We're watching it thinking, why are we watching this now? And it's so when she shows up in Endgame, so it's not so much of we don't need this, it's we should have had this earlier.
I feel you. I push back a little bit on you there on that, because I think, to me, right, one thing that also is tough, like what we were talking about with Black Panther and how we felt like his appearance in Civil War was like, oh man, this man's super strong. He's going blow for blow with some of our favorite heroes. And then I felt like for him to beat like 3 bad guys or 4 bad guys in the beginning of Black Panther was like hard for him. And I was like, wait, he was just getting at it against Cap, like scratches on the shield and all that. And then swapped up and took the bad guy out in the end of the movie. Like, he was so awesome in the Civil War. Why'd they water him down? Like, I think that concept, they were intentional, I think, in waiting to put Captain Marvel, who is arguably one of the strongest Avengers there is in the MCU. I mean, we've got Scarlet Witch. Obviously, she's the strongest, in my opinion. But when it comes to Captain Marvel, I felt like the timing was absolutely necessary for them to put it there. Because if we met her in the beginning, wouldn't all of the powers of all the other heroes kind of just, like, wouldn't it just kind of like not match up? And then her jumping in at the end of Endgame we have some level of understanding in terms of why she pops in like that all strong. What do you think?
There's nothing that she did in Avengers Endgame that Thor couldn't do, I feel like.
Interesting.
So the attachment of all of the characters in Endgame, we don't have that for her going into Endgame. So I just wish there was more. I wish I was more connected to her going into the final battle of the MCU,
Do you still feel disconnected from her now?
Yeah, because we haven't seen her really since. And then, like, I just, not to really, I don't want to dive super deep into this since we have a bit of a discussion left. But it's just, I feel like the movie released at the wrong time. And because I love these heroes for who they are instead of just what powers they bring to the table, I wish if they would have done her earlier and then we don't see her until Endgame, that would have felt a little bit better. Just because the movie going experience wouldn't be why are we watching this? It's who are we watching this for? Who are we meeting here that I can fall in love with, and not why do I need to know this person?
I feel you. So you're not saying that the movie itself wasn't a good movie. You just felt like timing wise.
Well, my thoughts on whether or not it was a good movie is something else that we could get into, but I just think a large part of that does deal with when it released.
I respect that, bro. I respect your opinion.
To just quickly throw that in there, I also feel like Black Widow suffered for that same thing, where it's like, there's a reason why we're watching this 2 years, spoiler, after her character has already been shown to be dead. So who in this movie do I need to know? And that answer was made clear very quickly when the two most interesting characters in the movie look like they're going to have a bright future in the MCU.
Very true.
So, I don't think there is any MCU movie that I can say I could do without. I mean, there is one, but it's more so this idea of if this were placed earlier, it'd feel better. And when I watch things in chronological order, it feels better than release.
Definitely.
But I can't forget my original experience with the movie either.
100%. I respect that. I respect your opinion. I think for me, as I think about the list, nobody needed Thor 2, so they could take that back. They could take that back. They could take.
I disagree. I disagree.
Thor away too.
They could take Thor 4 away, but I want to get into that in my next topic of discussion. So we can quickly put a pin in that. I'm going to push back. Thor 2 was needed just because that's the stage where they're showing us the Infinity Stones. And although it's not the best movie, it still brings something.
Bro, they introduced...
It could have been done better. It can be, like, I'm not denying that. Bro, but
they introduced the Soul Stone. They rushed that process in Endgame. I mean, in Infinity War. And I love how they did it tone-wise. Like, we knew that that there was going to be 6 of these Johns, right? Like, we knew that. But they gave us a complete background of the stone, took Red Skull and just threw him in there, you know, and they just kind of like made it into a thing and taught us it, which I appreciated. I felt like it was done well. They could have done the exact same kind of concept without us having that Dark World movie, bro. That Dark World movie was absolutely...
But is that really when you want to do that twice?
No, I just feel
I'll take the slap on the chin. You want to know what I think happened with Dark World? I think people love the hell out of Loki and they threw a mixed garbage ass story together. And that's it. But to me, that's not even the worst Thor movie. And like I said, we're going to get to that. But
Love and Thunder was bad. But yeah. All right. So ask your next question. What's your last question there?
So now that we've gone over, you know, Marvel in its entirety in very brief ways, specifically phases 1 through 3, I would like to hop into the discussion of the phase that just ended with Black Panther phase 4, to quickly just hit bullet points of every project from the phase. It was definitely the MCU's biggest phase. So I think that
phase 4,
phase 4, in terms of the quantity that they produced.
They definitely shifted, right? The mentality here has been, it definitely screams quantity over quality, in my opinion.
I agree. You know, so I think in general census of phase 4, yeah, quantity over quality, and it's the weakest phase in my opinion.
But what do you think makes it the weakest?
I think that we can tackle that once we hit every project, because I appreciate what they attempted to do with this phase. I just don't feel like it's a strong point because of the weaknesses. I feel like the strong points of this phase don't reach the strong points of any of the other phases, but the weak points are weaker than the weak points of the other phases. And I think it's just a mixed pile, which granted, that's what they were going for. So they successfully did a bunch of stuff, but as a connected phase, it's the weakest one.
No, I see what you're saying. I agree with that. That's big.
But I'm not necessarily saying bad, just the weakest.
It's almost like they shot themselves in the foot with how great phase 1 through 3 was and the buildup of phase 1 to phase 2,
Yeah.
phase 3. It's like it's hard. They definitely
Absolutely.
they didn't rise to their own occasion. But go ahead. What
And
star movie
you
wise?
know, they tried to create a new formula.
Right.
And I think with phase 5, there might be returning back to the original. Not the original, but I think they might find a good mix. So to start this conversation off, we're just gonna go in order of release. Black Widow. The first movie after Spider-Man Far From Home, but the first movie after Endgame, realistically, like that after an entire phase, this was kicking it off. So what were your thoughts?
They're so slime. They did her so messed up, man. Because at the end of the day, right, like it's what you're saying with highs and lows and climaxes in the plot and the story. I feel like they knew this movie was undercooked, and then they put it and had it be eclipsed by the fact that that No Way Home and Endgame had just been happening prior to this movie. And then I think the time jump also, it just felt it felt tasteless, like it felt a little tone deaf to their own momentum. And as a result, I think that's the lens I saw the movie through. I mean, big love to Scarlett Johansson. I'm glad I got to see her again, especially because she dies in Endgame, right? Like that's a big deal. But we all know that this movie was just there to introduce Yelena, right? Yelena?
Yes. Similar to my feelings on Captain Marvel, Black Widow is a film that we should have gotten earlier. This film would have been perfectly released after Civil War.
Right.
And then
I agree.
It's just watching this movie, it's like I'm watching this film 2 years after I watched this character jump off a cliff.
That's what I'm saying. And
so we're watching it to give her depth, but why do I need to care about this now?
Exactly.
Oh, she has a sister. She has pops that's coming in. Okay, so we're really watching this movie for these characters.
Here's also
we're calling it Black Widow. We're saying it's to honor Scarlett Johansson. We're saying it's to honor Natasha Romanoff, but it doesn't really feel like it. If you really wanted to, you would have done it earlier.
I agree. I feel like whoever decided to still get that across the floor, they need to be questioned severely. I think we could have been introduced to Yelena in tons of other cool ways. Like, for example, what we'll talk about when it comes to Falcon and Winter Soldier, I just feel like the way that character was introduced, the villain in that storyline was introduced, something like that could have been meaningful in a TV show with Yelena, in my opinion. But I also play devil's advocate at the same time here, because one thing about Black Widow, right, is what they did by showing her us and deepening her character is it created somewhat of a deeper understanding of why her sister carries her deeply into the conflicts of this phase where we see her. And then also Hawkeye. I think that we see an echo of her emotional weight in Hawkeye. And I like that. I do like that too. I like that he's, I know we're going to get to that show, but him looking at her statue or looking at the words in New York City, like him just kind of like grieving her and then meeting Yelena in that show. There is a level of like Black Widow kind of foreshadows the presence of Black Widow in those two characters' lives. Like she kind of echoes through the phase because of that. And I respect that. That's the only thing I'd be willing to give, though. Like,
yes. And
anything else.
I am also very much aware of the fact that the person in charge of the MCU, not Kevin Feige, but there was someone above him, was very known as a racist and sexist person, which is why we didn't get a lot of these movies until later, like Captain Marvel, Black Panther, Black Widow. But even with that knowledge, it's just like I still can't, like, the film is good to me. It's a good movie in aspects of like the characters and the family, maybe not the villain, but overall it's just like
that's another reason why
it would have been so much better. And this is where my experience with it comes in, being up to date on the MCU.
Right.
If it were after Civil War and I didn't know about her fate, it would have been so interesting. And then to have these characters be introduced and then just disappear the way they do in her life, it's like, okay.
I agree, man. Plus,
So,
they messed up Taskmaster, so they suck for that. But anyway, jeez Louise.
yeah.
And I love,
I started with Black Widow, but I'm realizing now I really should have started with
WandaVision.
the real thing that kicked off Phase 4 MCU, WandaVision.
Man.
So as a live experience, I will say WandaVision was something else.
Yeah, it was
upon going back and rewatching it and really getting rid of the initial viewing experience, my thoughts on it have kind of changed based on when you know the whole story, things change, your opinion on it changes, and I feel like you can only really react to something in its entirety.
I guess with the fresh effect, I hear what you're saying. But my thing is this: when you go back and watch it after watching it once, did you like it more or did you like it less?
I liked it less because there were things that watching it the first time you're like, "Ooh, I wonder where they're taking that," and then they don't take it anywhere.
Right.
So the first time you're like, the suspense from week to week was great,
Yes.
but then when you get to the finale and it's all, oh man.
Yeah.
So that's why sometimes I'm like, first time watching it, it was this. Second time, little less. And I normally give the little less.
I feel like what you've said in the beginning of this episode continues to like echo through the conversation, and it's gonna continue to echo as we talk Phase 4. I think like because this was fresh off of the momentum of Phase 3, what was cool for me, right, perspective wise, was Marvel proved yet again that they can make a entertainment phenomena and have everybody in the world be like captured by something they've created story wise. That's what we all showed up to the theaters to see, Infinity War, and were crippled by the death of our heroes. We proved, and I think we proved it again with WandaVision. This thing was going crazy on social media. I was trying to duck as many spoilers as I possibly could before my wife and I sat down to watch it. Like, WandaVision was a moment, even if the show was mid in the sense of how it resolved itself in some areas. Some things were undercooked, big build up for nothing kind of vibes. I was more enjoying the ride for WandaVision. And I think sometimes a TV show, that's what a TV show is supposed to be. It doesn't have to be the illest, writing all the time. I'm big on writing, that. But like the flow of WandaVision, how it felt watching it live, it was up there. It was one of my favorite moments from the phase.
Yeah, as an experience, WandaVision was something else. But looking at it after, from the perspective, in its entirety, it is lacking in areas.
For sure.
But I think it was a highlight of Phase 4 for me. If you ask me, the TV shows felt like bigger highlights than the movies from this phase in its entirety.
I'll push back a little bit on that.
There were 8 TV shows and there were 7 films. And when I look at the titles on my screen currently, the TV shows really were more there for me than the films.
See, that's where me and you differ. I think the movies were more there for me. And as I looked at the list, I was kind of surprised that these movies all belong to Phase 4. Because in my head, I'm like, Phase 4 was trash. But then I'm looking at the list and I'm like, wait. I mean, I don't hate every single movie on this list. Like, there's actually a couple that, like, where the other ones were weak, there's a couple that are strong enough to cover those.
Yeah, let's finish going through these films. Falcon and the Winter, or everything. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, for me, the first 3-4 episodes I was in and I was like, yeah, I'm moving with this. John Walker was so interesting. Sam and Bucky going back and forth together was fantastic. And exploring the reasons as to why Sam made the decision that he did was done very well. And it is great commentary on the world that we live in, because the MCU was kind of always both a reflection of our world as much as it was fun superhero stuff. But the finale kind of made that entire show fall apart for me. I love where it ended with Sam becoming Captain America, but I don't know. The villains weren't good besides Walker. And then there's my least favorite MCU character currently is in that show. And that show made me like, I don't care for this character anymore.
Is it Baron Zemo?
No, it is Sharon Carter. And I just, I need to see what they do with her, but I can't. That show, I don't know, man. She was dope in Winter Soldier, and then in Civil War, I was like, all right, heard you. And in this show, I got a complete 180 on her, and I just need to see if what they did is that like a play on something else, or is that really how things are? Because if that's how things are, yikes. But like I said, I need the whole picture. So if it turns out that there's other things that I don't know yet, then that could be forgiven. Things can change. My thoughts on these movies and shows completely change based on where the narrative does go, even though I like to base them on how the movie presents itself on its own. So right now, Falcon the Winter Soldier, fantastic build-up that for me just falls apart in the last episode. And I do hear the critiques of, if this show was removed, what do we really lose? I can hear that. Because if you don't watch this show, what changes for the next time you see Sam? He's Captain America. He was Captain America at the end of Endgame. He's Captain America here. Yeah, you miss his journey on deciding to not be and picking it back up. But I can see why people are like, do I really need to?
Again, man, I think that we get back to this concept of like, it was one of the weaker links of in my opinion, of the phase. And it had no reason to be. In my opinion, I think this should have been a great show. I feel like it should have been one of the best pieces of Phase 4. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I don't know, man. I think journey-wise, again, though, like, like I know I sound like a broken record, but at the end of the day, like, I think one thing they did in Phase 4 that I used to complain about with Phase 1, 2, and 3, talking to buddies, we would sit and we would talk. Friends and I would watch the movies, and even me and you, we'd feel frustrated with the lack of depth in some of these movies. And then I think in Phase 2, they turned up to this level of like depth in some of the characters that they really found a way to translate across the screen. And then I think that's one of Russo brothers' like specialty. We were able to see the conflict to a deep degree between these characters as a result of the depth that they created. So for me, I feel like as much as there's depth in the other seasons, for Phase 4, they took a lot of time to let us see these characters, especially in the form of TV shows. And I liked the Isaiah timeline in this show. I liked Bucky in this show and the things Bucky's mentally wrestling with. I think for Falcon, I just felt like there was a little bit of cheesiness to what they tried to do. It felt like, I don't know, I just felt a little bit suspended above how I felt like that storyline could have been shown and filmed and written. But, it is what it is. I think at the end of the day, the journey to be able to understand these characters more so that I understand a little bit more of the banter between the two of them, which we've always had, but now we have some more grounds for it. That's where I appreciated the show. But it's still a weak link. I'm not saying it's not a weak link, but that's how I feel about it.
I mean, I think it was a good show. I do think it is a weak link. Phase 4 is clearly what I was calling the fallout phase. It's the phase where we get to see how the actions of the first 3 phases affect the characters that we have left remaining, the grief that they go through, what their lives look like now after all of the craziness of Phase 3. Some of these stories worked and some of them just didn't, which I think brings me to my next point, my next television show that we're talking about, and it is probably the show I'm most conflicted with.
Conflicted? What do you say?
I think that the show was produced brilliantly, and I loved watching it week to week. But I still have yet to decide whether or not I like the implications that it has for the MCU.
Yo,
And I don't think I'm going to understand how I feel about it until phases 5 and 6 are complete. I need the stories to wrap up before I really understand. And it's kind of the only show I think that is getting a second season. So Loki, loved it. I loved it. And I'm still so conflicted because I can't say whether or not loving it will remain or if I will dislike it. But as of right now, I thought it was great. The finale was something else. Fantastic. And it's probably the most important television show when it comes to the next few phases, which is why I need to see how it all plays out before I can say, yeah, Loki was definitely this.
Loki was the best show in the phase, in my opinion. It's a hands down thing for me. There's no need, There's some other performances by actors in certain shows that are good, you know what I mean? Great writing and other shows that's for Ms. Marvel. But when it comes to like being the best in terms of taking what we know about a character and allowing us to have the room to like learn them in a new way, I just felt like Loki was the most refreshing piece of Marvel art in the form of film or TV that had come out in a while. And I think it's maybe because the formula had been making itself known, right? There is some level of the same kind of act 1, act 2, act 3 rhythm to Marvel movies and content. I felt like Loki threw that all out the window. I felt like all of the unorthodox writing, the fact that they gave more of a philosophical view to the villain that was the first villain of the Avengers, the main villain that everybody was like, man, Loki, like this was the Thanos before Thanos. We knew Thanos was Thanos. Like he was the main antagonist. To see him just be a broken man or a broken god, and then or a broken giant. Shout out to my God of War guys out here. I just think like at the end of the day, the way that they wrote this guy in this story was so authentic and relatable. I felt like Marvel had never gotten down on their knee like that in any content they made. Like that. I felt like it was really deep. Loved that. I thought Loki was great for that reason and that reason alone. It didn't matter if he was going to go to a planet and on that planet he was going to fight versions of himself dressed up as a clown. Like, I'm going to be with him no matter what, because the first episode made me want to follow him on whatever journey he's going to go on. And then the way that it concludes, listen, man, I told y'all this before. I'm going to say it again. Jonathan Majors is here for everything. He's not just here for like one thing. Oh, nice movie. Ant-Man was so good. Yo, he's literally holding all of Phase 5, Marvel in the palm of his hand, yo. And not only that, Hollywood. My man Jonathan Majors is going off 2023. But I love that last episode. So I know how you feel confused and conflicted. I'm hearing you on that. Sure, we'll see the repercussions, but I wouldn't change a thing. The show was up there for me. Up there.
I mean, yeah, you're speaking from a production standpoint. It was fantastic. But when I look at it from the entirety, it's like, okay, yes, I love the look in depth with Loki, and I love that Tom Hiddleston was able to shine as the star. Even though he was always the scene stealer, this was his time to star. But it's a different Loki, and I can't forget that. Like, the Loki that I loved had his end, so this is a new character, and I'm enjoying this deep dive, but I'm separating that from that. The idea is that everything was controlled, and I don't know how I feel about that. Plus, I really feel like Marvel is not sure how their timeline stuff or their time travel works and everything like that. Which is why I'm just saying, like, there are things about this show that when I look at, I'm like, but how does that work in relation to this and that? So it's like it's picking things. I think I rated the show like an 8 or a 9. Like, it is really good. But I still am just confused because of what it means for the whole. And that's really it. I think it is probably the best produced show of the entire phase. And I'm excited for season 2, which I believe drops this summer at some point. So that's dope.
It's going to be good.
This one, if you want, we can really talk about it. You could probably hear it in the tone of my voice. I don't have much to say. What if?
Yeah, I mean,
It's my least favorite part of the entire phase. I think there were golden moments. I didn't need it.
I think we needed it because no, we didn't need it. I appreciated it for the feel of like comics, the feel of just the alternate lines. I think they were increasing our ability to laterally think when watching a Marvel movie, a concept of what could be, because I think a lot of what's happening towards the end of phase 4, beginning of phase 5 is exactly that, with multiverse concepts. I mean, they even did that obviously with Endgame. I think it's supposed to get the viewer to kind of be open to more of what could be, because some of what could be will pop up, and I think I liked that concept. But I did we need it? Nah, we didn't need it.
I liked some of the episodes, but if they would have kept everything separate, I would have liked it more, maybe. But the fact that they brought this whole narrative of, okay, well, wait a minute, now we have Ultron, and now it turned into a story where it all connected, I didn't like that.
Yeah, sure.
I liked it when it was just week to week. And then let's not even discuss how, like, there is an entire episode that was cut from this season, yet those characters still appeared in the finale. And so it's like, who gives a crap about episode is in season 2. So the finale of that and just all of it, it would just, once I realized it was connecting, I was like, Doctor Strange's episode, fantastic. Or the weekly murders, but other than that, I often forget about What If. The only reason why I brought it in right now is because I see it on this page that I'm looking at.
Definitely a product that suffers from the quantity over quality concept.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm gonna ask that you and myself contain ourselves, because I believe that this next project is both of our favorite projects of the phase. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Listen,
that movie was ridiculous,
bro. I just loved everything about it. I think in another episode, maybe I mentioned the fact that I feel like it has Iron Man 1 vibes. I just love the origin. Like, it's fun. It has like a wonder to it, but then again, all of the homage to the culture it comes from, the culture that this tradition for this superhero comes from. I just felt like they did a really good job at the way they filmed it, the way they wrote it. Shout outs to the writer, big fan of the writer. He wrote the movie The Shack, which is based off of that book, The Shack. And there was just something about the heart behind the way this film was. That end scene with the dragon, when he's dancing, when he's moving with that scene gives me chills every single time I watch it. I watched it like 7 times, and it's just, this was my movie. This was my movie of the phase.
That film is in my top 10 MCU movies.
My top 3, boy.
They came in and they really just, I feel like most of everyone brought their A game. And the way they were like, yeah, we messed up with the Mandarin before. Let's make him cool. And boom. Mm-hmm. And let's make it a father-son story that really hits, because it did hit. And let's have it have some of the best action sequences in the entirety of the MCU, like the scaffolding fight.
Scaffolding fight was so fun.
And an origin movie that feels like it has basically no ties to any other MCU movie so deep in this, and it worked. Okay.
Great. And I love the end credit scene. I love everything. Awkwafina killed this. She killed this.
Yeah. And there's when you hit the end credits to a movie, the end credits can stick in your mind. To jump back, Black Panther, that movie ends and you hear all the stars booming in the theater with the visuals. Beautiful. I got the same vibes in this movie.
Yeah.
When that ended, and you hear Anderson .Paak come through on the speakers, it's just like, damn.
Yeah.
That was a very fun experience. That was a great...
and the soundtrack also really went. This was a good soundtrack. Best soundtrack since Black Panther, actually, I'd say.
So, that was a nice, very quick, because we could go on forever about that.
No, movie. that was concise. I'll take that.
Eternals.
Stop it. Stop it.
Somehow, I don't think it's the worst movie in the phase. I think they tried something different. I think some of it worked. I think a lot of it might not have. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it is an okay movie that I'm waiting to see what happens with next. And that's really it for Eternals. I don't have much to say about that movie.
I'd say I'd pull on the same point you made about Loki, right? Like, but in the opposite direction. It's a mid movie. It's like a 6, 7. But it's important. It's an important movie, and I think we'll see the repercussions of that importance in Phase 5, more in Phase 5. But I think also what sucks is because it was poorly done, there will be callbacks to that movie that no one will remember because it didn't grip the fan base. But me personally, I watched it like 4 times. I think I liked how it was filmed. Also, I like the fight scenes.
No, yeah, I was gonna say visually, there's a lot about that movie that looks great. Icarus as like the Superman, that they joke around with.
Yeah,
he looked good. Or Makari, the way they did Speedster in this film, was fantastic. But I also gave that movie a 6 because a lot of the characters to me were like, who, what?
Right. Yeah, and they should have did a better job in light of that. And I think the end credit scene was a lot. It was a lot. There was a lot going on. But it is what it is.
It is the most out there movie, and it definitely feels that way. But I think people should give it a try. I'm not someone who shoots it down,
Word.
Because some people loved it. Next up is Hawkeye. Hawkeye, I think I still feel like it's my favorite of the MCU TV shows. I don't think it's necessarily the best, but something about that time period of Christmas and the vibes of the show, I just loved it. I loved it.
I just felt exactly that. I think they did a Die Hard vibe, and it stuck the landing. And I love my guy, bro. I love Hawkeye. I love the family man. I love him as a character. He's unique. He's unique compared to all the other Avengers, as we know. And so I think they did a really good job at playing into his strengths. And I love introducing him as this kind of like older brother figure in this one too. It was just good. It was just good, man.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say about that show that you won't be able to relate to this. The actor Tony Dalton is on that show. Tony Dalton is on Better Call Saul. Tony Dalton on Hawkeye is Kate's stepfather. The guy with the sword.
Yes.
He has a vibe about him when he acts that he loves acting. And he was mad fun on Hawkeye, but damn, do they need to do something else with him, because he is an actor that will kill whatever you give to him. So I don't want to say he was wasted on Hawkeye, but he might have been wasted in his role on Hawkeye. But yeah, so if you really want to get to know who Tony Dalton is, you just got to watch Better Call Saul. But that's not what this episode is about. So to move it back into our conversation, the event movie of Phase 4, and some might say bigger than Endgame.
We're gonna fight. I hope we fight.
Spider-Man No Way Home.
Word. Another phenomenon, bro.
Another movie that you were dodging spoilers 7 months in advance.
It was a great experience, bro.
It was a great experience.
I definitely love that, but I'll be the Debbie Downer on this one. I don't think it was the strongest movie. I felt disappointed when I left. I loved the theater experience of, there's something about fan service. There's something about fan service and just getting fans what they want that is going to get you a W in the experience area when we're trying to rank a film. Because when you're in the theater and everyone freaks out, it's crazy, right? But for me, again, I'll be the negative Nancy. Like I feel like the weight of Cap picking up Mjolnir and that and what it did for the theater, it's a different weight. It's a different height of peak, like what you were saying earlier today, like than seeing Tobey Maguire pop up or seeing Andrew Garfield. For
I
me,
mean, yeah, one is nostalgia and one is earned, you know? And I just think that I think the end game moments hit harder than the Spider-Man No Way Home moments, but the build up to Spider-Man No Way Home and just seeing the three Spider-Men on the screen together is just an experience in itself. Because you're watching Tobey Maguire, who hung up his costume in 2007, come back 15 years later.
right?
You're watching Andrew Garfield, who in my opinion was done hella dirty by the producers and the people at Sony, come back and give it another chance and completely kill it, stealing every scene he's in that movie.
Right.
And then Tom Holland, the future of this Spider-Man franchise, learning and adapting from these new Spider-Men. It's great. Do I think the movie is the best? Hell no. I don't even think it's the best MCU Spider-Man movie. I think the movie is overhyped in many senses, but it's still a movie.
The moment.
It's a moment.
It was a moment. And
you know, with a weak beginning, the Tom Holland brought his A game for that movie, I will say.
He definitely did. He did.
And the ending, I would love to dive deeper into what you mean about you felt disappointed because are you disappointed in how it ends or just the movie itself? Because I love the ending and it rips my heart out.
The ending was great. I think they ended it perfectly. I think for what Spider-Man and being Spider-Man's supposed to mean for Peter Parker and the loneliness of that responsibility fully hitting him. Like we saw him go through stuff in other movies, but this one, it left a sting. And I think that discomfort we felt as the audience wanting him to get what he deserves because he fought so hard, them playing into that, like against that, it was so smart. And I just think it's so Spider-Man. And I love that. I love that. But I still left feeling like that was a great bow on the end, but the amount of phoned in moments throughout the middle of the film, it was frustrating for me to be able to enjoy them together. Like that was my issue. Like I think Aunt May dying made no sense. And the entire concept of her dying was like a Deus Ex Machina moment of like, let's manufacture a trauma that creates a major emotional shift in Peter Parker, Tom Holland's version. Like, let's just, it triggers something in him because that's what we need to get to the last act. And I just felt like it was phoned in. She didn't need to die. The way she died was corny.
I mean, I think it makes sense. I think the way they executed it was terrible.
Yeah. But now listen, at the same time, what was good about that scene was Willem Dafoe, bro, in this movie, bro.
Number one.
Yo.
Number one.
When he's getting punched in the face and he's switching his emotions, like I do playing peekaboo with my daughter, I was just losing my marbles in the theater. It was insane. It was a great showing by him. It was great to see everyone. I'm not saying I was upset about that. I just like it. It's hard. You got all these big faces, big characters. You got to figure out a way to write it. I think that they could have done a little bit of a better job in that area, but
Norman's on sabbatical, honey. He destroyed that movie.
That was crazy.
But overall, I feel like you and I are on the same page of thinking like it was a great event movie, but you know, let's look at it for what it is, not what the hype was. Back to TV shows. Moon Knight.
Yeah, man.
Moon Knight was a killer ride with an okay production show with Oscar Isaac killing the role. I mean, it was a fun time. Do I think it's the greatest? No, I think there's a lot that could be done to make it work better. But for what it was, watching week to week, once again, I was there. I was like, okay.
Big facts.
This is dope. This is cool. It may fall a little bit flat, but we doing something. So Moon Knight was a fun ride. It was a great time.
I think he's a weird character. It was cool for them to have him. I feel like usually they don't do characters like him. And that was cool. And I, like you said, Oscar Isaac held that whole showdown. I mean, to be able to swap tones and countenance as an actor right on one scene and in one take, it's cool to see him do that.
Yeah, if any other television show on this list deserved the second season, it's this show. Because there's so much more to explore with his character and the things that he can do.
Other than Loki.
Well, Loki got a second season, so that's why I wasn't.
But it deserves a second season.
Of course.
Okay, cool.
Here we go. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I remember going to watch it the day of my college graduation party and seeing you that night and looking at you like, I'm sorry, bro, because the movie just wasn't good for me. Like, no, it wasn't great for me. It was okay. And I remember the day they announced this movie was the day of your wedding in 2019.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, Sam Raimi hard? That's going to be dope. Sam Raimi, to me, outdated director, wasn't the right person for this job. Scarlett Johansson, Scarlet Witch, and the actress Elizabeth Olsen did great. Didn't really care for what they did with her character in it. I liked the idea of her becoming a villain, but I didn't feel like we earned it in some senses after leaving her off in WandaVision.
I guess.
And in this film, I just think it wasted potential just because it just wasn't good as Doctor Strange. The first one was one of my favorite films, and then this one I was just like, okay.
No, I agree with you on the Raimi point. Definitely, man. I think the movie just felt outdated. The CGI felt corny in certain areas. It kind of felt like puppet showy. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It felt like a puppet show in certain areas. The way that they decided to have the tone of certain people dying gruesomely. Now, when I heard that this was a horror film, right? I remember those were the first rumors. It started to get me excited, right? Because I was like, this is new, it's different. And so I think when I found out that people are saying it's not really that horror, it's more like thriller action type of vibe, I'm like, all right, okay, sounds good. But I still had this expectation that it would be different. And I think because I expected it to be different, which I'm going to be honest, I'm carrying that same expectation into Quantumania. Like, I'm going to go in there looking for weirdness. I want weird. I want wonky. Because I think that that's exactly where they're intending to go, especially with when we talk about them trying to expose us to multiverse in a variety of ways. And I think this movie had a very difficult job of showing from a different angle what we got to see in Endgame. But I think when it comes to the verbiage and the language of the world of Doctor Strange, that Raimi did use what he could, the best that I felt like he could in that regard. I don't know how someone would get the concept of multiverse across any better. I felt like it was explained perfectly. It was edited perfectly when she wakes up, from dream walking, dream jumping. What was it called?
I think it was dream walking.
Dream walking, and then it shows her depressed after the camera flips back up that shot, bro. Like, there's certain moments where I'm like, y'all.
There are great moments in that movie where I'm like, I love it. I love that tension build up, but then a lot of it falls flat in some areas also. And
sure.
And then there are just things about the movie also that I'm like, they really in the last Doctor Strange were setting up. I can't remember his name right now, but the other wizard from that movie as the next villain.
Word. I feel.
Oh yeah, he chased me for a few years, and that's it. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. The movie gets a little cherry though from me because they gave me John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic.
Come on, bro. Think about this, bro. Think about how meta that was in its execution. Again, there's a different way to do fan service, and this fit the concept, right? No Way Home felt like a phoned in moment, bro. As much as I know it was nostalgia and all that, it's just the way you go about it. I actually thought Multiverse was better than No Way Home, not just experientially for me. I felt like quality of movie wise, I enjoyed it more. That's just my personal opinion. I also love the fight scenes in this movie. The music fight scene was crazy with the notes with him. Yo, bro, that was insane. And they can only do that in a kind of weird and wonky world that Raimi did build. I'm not saying I didn't, I'm not saying I enjoyed
I think it
calling
could
out
have
the
been
mirror
better.
shot. That was disgusting. I felt it was terrible. I'm like, what are we watching? The Ring? This is 2003. I don't know what's going on. But there are certain moments, certain lines I did appreciate, man. I did really appreciate. It was cool to see Professor X.
I can appreciate the moments, but the film itself,
It's an 8. It's an 8,
not
bro.
an 8.
It's an 8, bro. It's an 8.
For you, it's an 8.
It's an 8. And No Way Home was like a 7.5 for me.
For me, Doctor Strange is like a 6.
It's an 8.
Maybe a 7, but not an 8. 8 is great territory for me, and I don't think Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness was great.
Okay, that's fair.
Like I said, it was okay, and I liked it more my second watch than I did on my first. But with Doctor Strange being one of my favorite characters in that first movie, and then just a lot about it, I was just like, man, come on.
I love Doc.
Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch, love him. All right, Miss Marvel. Did you watch Miss Marvel?
I did, man. I loved Miss Marvel. I
also loved Miss Marvel.
I don't have any complaints. I thought everything was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was emotional.
They were creative,
funny,
coming of age story that I've realized I'm a sucker for those coming of age stories.
Refreshing, yeah.
And I will back the statement that I believe her name is Iman Vellani is the most perfect casting for the MCU since Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man.
I agree.
She had the energy that I was like, yep, I love her. I love her so much. And it was just so fun. Now, there are things about that show that I'm like, yeah, that didn't work, or this didn't work. Like the villains, they didn't really work. But watching Iman Vellani and watching the energy of Kamala Khan, I was like, yeah, I'm here. So when I said Hawkeye, I think is still my favorite show, it's because I had Miss Marvel in the back of my mind. Like that show was great. It was just so fun. It was a fun, and I've heard people say, oh, it's just a kid's show. And I'm like, it was fun. I don't care. I don't care.
I don't know why they would say that.
We have 3 more things to discuss. We're going to move in, and I'm really hoping we get through this one quickly. Thor, Love and Thunder. Garbage. Probably my least
Talk about waste.
favorite.
This movie was a waste. This movie wasted so much.
My least favorite film, probably in the MCU. And Captain Marvel and Thor 2 were that for me for a long time. But I think the idea of what this could have been just impacts this too much for me. How do you waste Christian Bale?
That's what I'm saying, bro. Like,
how do you do that?
Only Takai Waititi can do that. I'll tell you that. I'm not trying to be a hater. Thor 3 was great. We all know that. That's one of the best of the best in the entire lineup. But yo, bro, like, not everything is funny, bro. Not everything is funny. This wasn't funny to me. I just felt like everything was forced laughter. They didn't give enough room for emotional weight. So you felt this vacillation between, like, is it funny? Is it drama? Is it serious? Is it a joke? And it wasn't with the way that the third movie had a perfect mix of both. Like, it was just perfectly timed writing. All of that was great. This movie, man, I was like, yeah, get me out of here. I got to get out of here.
This movie is
if I didn't pay for this, I would have gotten out of there earlier.
Buttons.
Booty cheeks.
And I have a extra special hatred for that movie because I got COVID when I went to go see that movie, like in the theaters when I got COVID for the first time. So I was like, damn, yo, if I was watching the Batman, you know what I'm saying? Like, I got COVID watching some awesomeness, but Love and Thunder, bro.
Not it, bro.
Just that movie.
Poopies.
Yeah. If I still think What If, I might like What If more actually, but Yeah, that was big yikes. It just felt weak to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, like actors weren't trying their hardest. It was just whatever.
Let's see
I
that.
can move on. I can move on from that film. The final TV show of Phase 4, She-Hulk Attorney at Law. I
Yeah, so
believe
I didn't watch anything beyond the first episode of this one.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of mixed things. I've heard a lot of Daredevil talk. But I haven't watched it myself yet.
I'll just quickly run through it then. I really liked She-Hulk. I understand where people are coming from when they say I don't know if we're doing spoilers for this because you haven't seen it. I don't know if you care.
It's whatever. It's whatever.
The show essentially is I don't want to say nothing, but it builds a bunch of convoluted plots that in the finale, the climax of the show is her saying nothing happening here makes sense. She punches a hole through Disney Plus, climbs out of the TV, and goes and talks to a robot who is essentially Kevin Feige and tells him, like, what's up with this and this and that. He's like, okay, we'll fix it. And then that's it. Like, that's it. There is no resolution. There is no plots that she steps out and is like, yo, fix the MCU, bro. And that's what that whole thing is.
What?
So I can get what people are coming from when they're like, they made it messy on purpose just to have that moment where her comic book character, she busts out the comic. She comes and she brings Kevin Feige some really good points, if you ask me, like, what are we doing with this? And what's exactly is happening with that? And why are you doing this? And he's like, oh, I can't really do that. And so some of that was cool, but I get it. There is no real climax. That is the climax. But I still appreciated the show for what it was. The Daredevil episode was fantastic. I'm excited to see what they do with Daredevil.
We're 2023, baby.
So
I
and
know,
you know, Charlie came right in and he was great.
like he never left.
Yeah, people are trying to clown that, you know, they want bloodied up fist Daredevil, and I'm like, no, I don't really need that all the time. He was mad fun in this. Yeah, I really think this was just a fun project for them. That's it. It was a fun time when you're not really looking at it through a critical or serious lens.
Aren't they talking about critically and socio-critical, like critical social issues throughout the entirety of the show while joking?
Somewhat, but at the same time, it is just very like sometimes she just takes a nod over to the camera and is like, oh wow, look at that. And then
I'm gonna have to
you
see
know, I would recommend going through it. There are some episodes here like, did I really just have to waste my time on this? But then there are others where I'm like, hey, that was kind of good. That was kind of cool.
All right, bro. Go on to the last one because I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
All right. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
So you're telling me you just watched this like 2 days ago?
At the time of this recording, I watched it yesterday. Yeah. I didn't watch it in theaters. I waited for it to come out on Disney Plus.
I'm not going to muddy up with my opinion. I just want to hear your.
No, I want you to go first.
Well, that's not going to work. You're going first.
All right. I'm just for the sakes of, I'm gonna just pull out the review that I wrote for it.
This guy's grabbing a script, friends. He can't just give it to you live.
Not a script, but
it's a script.
The movie, I needed to think about it all day after watching the movie.
Oh, so you were conflicted?
I was conflicted.
This man always conflicted, friends. He can never just.
Please, you be conflicted more than me. So the reason why I was conflicted is just because there's so much to this movie. Because it is not a normal movie, even though it is. I think it was a worthy sequel to what the first Black Panther was. And I think given the circumstances that Ryan Coogler was given based on the real life passing of Chadwick Boseman, which you and I were together when he passed away. we were chilling in the little family room, just you and I, and we saw that, and it was just such a shock. And I remember that. He did his thing with this movie, given the circumstances.
Okay.
Number wise, maybe this is just the best way to get into this conversation. I feel like you should lead and ask me questions regarding it, but I gave it a 7 out of 10, which is good, but like not.
I bet. Let me ask you some questions. Let me ask you some.
Go ahead.
What did you think about Shuri? What did you think about Shuri?
Damn, you really went into the hardest one. All right. I think
Sure, you want to answer that
everything.
first? I want to back up and do a different question first.
We could go right in, man. It's definitely the roughest question to go into, but Letitia Wright, when portraying in your face grief, was great. I don't think Letitia Wright is a strong enough actress to carry a Black Panther franchise.
Wow, that is a bomb of a statement, friends. Oh my gosh.
I just didn't feel compelled during some of her moments where I felt like I should have been.
Wow.
And that's what I sat on all day, because there were moments where I watched her acting and I was like, wow, beautiful. Like the scene on the beach, or where she's going in and questioning her faith and her family's history, trying to replace it with science. Those moments are done so incredibly well from her. But then I think about what the next movie could look like, where this isn't maybe something that needs to happen again, and I don't know if I see her as a strong lead.
Okay. I don't agree, but okay. I understand what you're saying. I think, do you feel like, here's my question, do you feel like that because of the shadow that's over her cast by Chadwick Boseman?
No, because my opinion on his acting in Black Panther was not similar, but like that movie was carried by so much more, which maybe the Black Panther franchise is more of a movie about everyone rather than one. But he was good enough in that Black Panther movie. Like I already said, I preferred him in Civil War. Like I feel like that was the A game.
Right.
But I don't know. I think I understand why, and I understand the history behind choosing her as the next. But
I think there was
I don't think they were ready. I don't think she was ready to take this mantle and this role on as fast as it happened. I think
what you're saying right there is why I liked it. And again, maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but I felt like she wasn't ready, and she's not ready, but she rose to the occasion live on camera is what I felt like I got from her acting. And there are some places where you can tell that that Coogler sat down and definitely wrote, trying to think through what this means for Letitia, not just Shuri. Like, there's no way that didn't make his way into the writing, because I think we get to see a flow between scenes where she just gets to emotionally kind of grieve after working with Chadwick Boseman. Now, in the stance as the lineage goes on of her character behind his character, you feel that on the beach. You feel that in moments where she's grieved. But then there's also just such great writing from Coogler where she just had to show up and just do what the script says. Like that scene when she's about to kill Namor, and she says that vengeance has consumed us, which is the exact same line.
Civil War. In Civil War, when he's with Zemo, he says, vengeance has consumed them. It has consumed you. I will not let it consume me.
I'm not letting it consume me. Yes.
That is a fantastic line that supports the idea that man was dope as hell in Civil War.
So then, boom, that's what the Echo is tying all the way back to. And I think that's cool, right? Because again, does she rise to the occasion? I don't know. That's up for interpretation, but who she is on the inside is the same exact integrity that her brother is, which
Yeah.
is integrity of Wakanda. So I felt like that was great. I loved how they wrote that out.
I'm happy to be proven, I don't want to say wrong, but like what I saw here didn't necessarily convince me that she is strong enough to lead a franchise. I'm happy to see her do it.
Right.
I didn't think she was bad. I just don't think it was a strong point for me.
Last point, what'd you think about Ironheart?
Wow, you really hit my two, like, so I think first Dominique Thorne was fantastic. I think her acting was incredible.
Mm.
But it's definitely a case of, all right, you're getting a TV show, but we got to introduce you beforehand. Let's do it. I kind of like how they did it with like, all right, yeah, she is involved. She's
Right.
more involved than I think Martin Lawrence's character needed to be in this movie. But either way, I believe Ironheart, she was cool. Could have done without her.
Mm.
I could go either way.
Yeah.
What I would love to discuss is Angela Bassett
Bro,
coming in, and
she's the queen, bro. She's the queen, dog.
she, yeah, yeah, just I feel like the noises that are coming out of my mouth speak.
Yeah, man.
Whenever she was on screen, I was like, yeah, I felt that. When the scene where she's talking to the UN and she's calling them out on their shit, I'm like, yeah, talk to them, because they needed that. They needed a spanking from the queen. She did fantastic. She did fantastic.
She was dying. Yeah. Also, shout outs to the cameo from Michael B on that one too. I actually enjoyed his cameo very much. I enjoyed it because I thought his acting in the first film was absolutely horrendous. I didn't believe a lick of what he was saying. But in this, it's almost like we got to see some of his Lori Harvey pain kind of seep through his character. I actually believed every single word that was coming out of his mouth in that scene, and it was just really well shot. So shout out to Michael B.
Yes, I think something I said recently is the more movies that I've watched with Michael B. Jordan in it, the more I'm like, damn, he isn't that crazy. Why my favorite role with Michael B. Jordan might be Jay Stratton from Gears of War 3. Like,
That's a fun fact for the homies.
But it was cool seeing him again, and I like the implications and the ideas of like, you're not gonna see who you want to see. You're gonna see who you need to see and who is right for you to see. That was dope. And then alternative to that, as we wrap up our episode, Namor was a fantastic character.
Bro.
They managed to separate him enough from Aquaman to say like, okay, he is different. And he came in and he made that movie his when it wasn't the Queen's, it was his. Yeah. He has some of the craziest lines. My man said, "You are the queen now." Like, I just killed your moms. Deal with it. He was dope, and I'm excited to see more of him as we move into the future. One other thing that I want to mention about the story aspect of the film: the Wakanda super suits are garbage.
Yeah, they look bad.
They look terrible. And the choreography was not there for me in this movie the way it was in the first one. With the Dora Milaje, they in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they was whipping ass. In this movie, they was whipping ass with terrible editing. And I just couldn't get behind it. Now, the best part of this movie, besides Angela Bassett and besides Namor, that what?
Letitia, stop playing with her, man.
The music of the film is fantastic.
Word, man. That's true. You're right. It's part of why I thought it was. Yeah, you're right. Definitely a big.
So there we go. Overall, the opening and the closing of this movie to me were perfection. They were done to perfection. Dealing with grief as someone who's studying the ideas of behind grief, they did it well, and it was an honorable movie for Chadwick in many ways. I am not secretive behind the idea that I believe they should have recasted Chadwick's role. I understand that it is like a very sensitive topic, but I think Chadwick understood it, that the character of T'Challa and the Black Panther are so much more than just him and it's his importance, but it seems like they are going to find a way to make that happen even without the role of T'Challa. And if they can do it, then I say, fair play to them. Um,
I don't know.
the cores of the film are about family and love, and I think even with all of my opinions on it, I think it did it well, and I think they covered grief very well also.
That's what I'm saying. I think
So
from a
it's a good
standpoint,
movie. It's a good movie.
Tisha, I felt like got that football into the end zone. The idea.
Yes, she did. She
I mean,
did.
so did Angela Bassett, 100%.
Well, Angela easily.
Easy.
With Letitia, when I say like the whole strong enough to lead, the grief aspects were not her problem with this movie. I just wonder what she looks like as a lead when the role and the topic is in grief. I wonder how she's gonna look next time we see her. Where of course she will probably still be dealing with that, but maybe to a less of an extent. I just think it's definitely my third favorite film of the phase.
Hmm.
With Spider-Man and 2 and Shang-Chi.
A lot of up and down, and I think that does come with the quantity over the quality.
Yeah.
And you can definitely tell the inconsistencies is you could see it through the TV shows and in the movies.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a couple hidden gems in this phase.
Yes. In every project.
Oh, absolutely. In every project, but also in the phase. Like anybody who's like, yeah, crumple this phase up and throw it away.
No.
There are definitely some shortcomings in the other three phases.
No. So overall, I think phase 4, there's something there that everyone will be able to find that connects with them. But the connectiveness with all of it just isn't there compared to before. But I think the MCU is still on its way to doing great things. So as we bring this episode to a close, the whole reason for this topic of conversation, Ant-Man Quantumania, comes out next week. By the time this episode out, it'll be out tonight. It's probably already out. People are probably already seeing it. So next week, our podcast episode will be discussing Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. It's not just Ant-Man, it's Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. So, we're going to try not to have every conversation like you have these back-to-back weeks, but, we're starting now, and it just so happens that it only makes sense to do Ant-Man.
Talk about it, man.
There's our phase 4 and just MCU discussion. I'm sure we'll come back to the MCU many times throughout our little podcast sessions.
I'm excited. I'm excited for phase 5. I'm excited for this being the kickoff. Again, back to the wonkiness and the weirdness. I'm hearing a lot of early reviewers say that. They're just saying it's different. And they're saying that Jonathan Majors holds this movie on his back, which I was already expecting. So it doesn't feel like too much of a spoiler. I'm looking forward to this thing, man. I think they're going to do a good job.
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys that agrees with the meme that they took Thor and they just turned the knob down on him as time has gone on in terms of his like effectiveness in the grand scheme of things. And I think in this movie and in this trilogy, they've just turned up the importance of Ant-Man. And I like that. I do like that. I'm not going to lie, because we were joking first movie.
Yeah, I mean, just to keep the topic on Ant-Man, this is starting phase 5 for a reason. And it's no secret that Jonathan Majors is coming in as the new Thanos. He's the big man, the big bad of the new saga. And so I think this movie, and I hope this movie shocks us and pleases us in all the right ways and gets us excited for the buildup that we need. So, yeah.
I think it will.
Yeah. So, I mean, we hope that you guys enjoyed our first topic of conversation episode. The MCU is a big staple in our entertainment industry currently, and so
Yes.
We would love to hear anybody's opinions about these things. We'll have ways for you guys to share your thoughts with us. And hopefully you join us next week for Ant-Man and Quantumania and
Big facts,
beyond. You know, that's really it.
Yes, we want to hear your Marvel Phase 4 opinions. So anywhere you follow us or connected to us, please, comment section, drop that for us so we know. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of CUZZO-OP. You know what I mean? Two cousins.
One podcast, endless entertainment. Fun bonus fact for anyone who still might be listening. On our Twitter banner, we have Easter eggs for all of our favorite things. Isaiah and I, favorite MCU hero is Captain America, and we got Cap's shield right on the wall.
Nah, bro, don't tell them. Don't tell them things. Don't tell them.
Nah. Just this one. They got to figure the rest out themselves.
Take a look, see if you can recognize some of those artifacts. Again, thank you for rocking with us, and we will catch you on the next one. Adios.